Yes, guys, welcome back to Flat Cap Euro Talk here, and we are going to be discussing the YVES BISSOUMA deal. Honestly, this one just came absolutely out of nowhere, I must say, everybody. Probably just because that's kind of how strategy works. Maybe there were a lot of smoke screens, put with other players, but we weren't even linked with that many midfielders, to be honest. So this one has just come completely out of nowhere. Fabrizio Romano has tweeted that it is reportedly a fee around 26 million euros, 5-year deal. But it was originally picked up by Gary Jacob from the Times, everybody. So not from Fabrizio, but from Gary Jacob over at the Times. He's the original guy who did pick up on the story. But let's talk about YVES BISSOUMA. Of course, I know there is this big elephant in the room, everybody, that involves some very, very serious accusations. Maybe I'll pull the screen away. Some very, very serious accusations towards BISSOUMA. I did kind of explain the whole timeline of those charges that have been put against him. The charges have just, as a disclaimer, the charges have been dropped. He is no longer under any bail or bond sort of conditions. Technically, the investigation is still ongoing, but he has basically been cleared of all charges. And is still technically innocent until proven guilty. He could be brought back into the investigation at any stage, but he has progressively been kind of slowly released, initially on bail, then on bond, then his bail and bond conditions were terminated or released. And I would say the one person that does seem to be maybe a major figure in this investigation is that 40-year-old companion of his, or whoever he was with that night. That 40-year-old person seems to be the main person in this allegation that might be the one perhaps maybe most in trouble, or the one that is going to be facing the punishment for the very, very serious crime. So maybe he's has some sort of association, or maybe he's a witness of the crime. That's all I can say. But I did do a big kind of breakdown of the timeline over in the Irish Hotspur as well, though I don't want to spend too much time, as I already have, on this. And so if you guys want me to maybe explain the whole situation with the charges against him, I can make a separate video about it. So let me know if you guys want to do that. Feel free to put that in the comments down below. But let's talk about YVES BISSOUMA, everybody, and what he could bring over to Tottenham Hotspur this last season in the 2021-22 campaign. Played 26 games, around 2,100 minutes, I believe. And he registered 1 goal and 2 assists. Born in Isia, Ivory Coast, actually, despite being, I believe, a Mali international. 25 years old, born in 1996. He stands at 6 feet inches, 1.82 meters tall. He plays as basically a CDM or as a center mid. Can play both, I think, quite competently, almost to an absolute quality and almost class level, you would say, absolute class level. Youth career was over at Majestic Sporting Club and then JMG Academy Bamako. I didn't do my further research on what those academies were. Market value was around 31.5 million pounds. But his contract went up in 2023 over at Brighton, which probably explains why we got him for such a cheap fee in the first place. And the fee is supposedly, to some outlets, is around 22.5 million pounds plus add-ons. So that could be around 25 million pounds. But I've also heard Fabrizio say it's around 26 million euros. So it'll be interesting to see what it ends up being at the end, but still an absolute steal by the looks of it. And it is a 5-year deal. According to Fabrizio as well, everybody. But let's kind of talk about, maybe Bissouma's kind of most recent season and how that sort of compares to other midfielders in the Premier League. So this is using FBref, of course. This is the main data and it's kind of stats site that we do talk about when, maybe looking at players' stats. And we are going to be comparing him to all midfielders in the Premier League, just midfielders, nothing else. And we are using his 2,100 minutes from the Premier League. Pass completion percentage is quite high. He doesn't really play that many passes a game, though. That must kind of be said. But regardless, his accuracy is still very, very high. Players dribble pass, he's able to skim past one player a game, puts him in the top 19th percentile when it comes to players dribble pass of all midfielders. Tackles and interceptions, I mean, this season, he's been in like the elite sort of levels. I think any player, I think I've said this before on this channel, any sort of player that, is averaging above 5 tackles and interceptions combined per 90 is at some sort of elite level. Like at any position in the field, that is an elite level of, tackles and interceptions per 90. He also doesn't get dribble pass very often, only 0.64 times per game. So in the top 7th percentile of times dribble pass. So he really rarely gets dribble pass. Interesting though, just to maybe take a look at, the position he plays for Brighton means that he isn't able to get forward as much as he probably, would like to, or at least I don't really know what his preferred position is. But I feel like Basuma was kind of used as more of a deep line kind of playmaker as well as a ball winner for Brighton, where they let other players be more the attacking sort of threat, and he wasn't given maybe the license to go forward as much. Where I feel like maybe with Spurs he could be given that license, which would explain maybe why his shots are not very high. I mean, he doesn't even average a shot a game over at Brighton, so you could kind of see that the way that he was used there was very limited and kind of very conservative. The way that Graham Potter was using him, that also kind of explains why his progressive passes aren't very high. Again, maybe playing very, very deep into the field, and just doesn't get the opportunities to play that sort of progressive pass or even be able to put shots on goal. That has a lot just to do though with the way that Brighton play. I don't think that's really a slight or in any means on Basuma. But let's compare how Basuma compares to maybe some of Spurs' midfielders. Compared to Højbjerg, it's actually quite interesting. But I would say again, though, like when you kind of think about how Basuma has been used by Graham Potter, especially this season, like it's in a much more limited conservative role than maybe what Højbjerg and Bentancur have been used as. I think Højbjerg and Bentancur, there's been a lot more asked of them this season. Their role is maybe a bit more broad in the midfield than Basuma's. I think Basuma, believe me, much better midfielder than the likes of Højbjerg and Bentancur, but he wasn't asked to do, I think, nearly as much this season as maybe the likes of Højbjerg and Bentancur were, which would then kind of show why maybe Bentancur and Højbjerg's stats in certain regards are actually better than Basuma's. And also when you even go into FBref, some of the stats that Basuma has are quite low per 90 and are quite low in the ranking. But I think that's just, again, how Graham Potter chose to use him, which means that some of his stats just don't look very good. And, as much as we love using stats on this channel, we know they're not the end all be all. And there's always really good explanations for maybe why, especially a class player like Basuma stats, maybe might not be very high. But as you can see, he dribbles past more players though than Højbjerg. He isn't able to play as much progressive sort of passes, like switches of play and progressive passes like Højbjerg can. But I bet if he were put into this team, he certainly would be able to. Tackles and interceptions, though, I mean, he's higher than Højbjerg, and anybody who's higher than Højbjerg definitely is impressive. And then he also doesn't get dribble past as much as Højbjerg does. But that also maybe has to do with the fact that Basuma does play in a midfield that has a few more players in it than what Højbjerg and Bentancur do. But if you were to compare maybe him to Bentancur, again, it's kind of similar story. Bentancur and Højbjerg have pretty similar stats. But the one thing that is definitely stands out to me is just, again, the fact that he isn't dribble pass very much, Basuma, and he still has a really high number of tackles and interceptions, which means that he is an elite ball winner. So when you have Bentancur, Højbjerg, and Basuma, some elite ball winners. Also Skippy, I mean, as well. All four elite ball winners when you really look at it. I mean, absolute hard nosed midfield. But I feel like Basuma's stats. This is kind of interesting, and I don't say this, really very much, but I'm not really sure how much I can really read into too much of his stats when either looking at it, compared to all midfielders in the Premier League or even just compared to Spurs' midfielders. Because again, like when I really looked at it, it just felt like he was used in such a limited role for what we know Basuma is capable of. I think Basuma is a top quality midfielder and is probably capable of a lot more things than maybe what meets the eye. So let's maybe talk about then what sort of like Basuma could bring to Spurs. Like, what are the attributes that he brings? I think he's an excellent ball carrier, probably a better ball carrier than Bentancur, better ball carrier than Skip, better ball carrier than Højbjerg. I think he beats all of them in that regard. He definitely has more flair than all of those guys as well, especially with the way that he is able to do sometimes one-touch passing. He'll win the ball, from somebody, then do a back heel. Just has a bit more flair to his game than the rest. Progressive play, I think, Højbjerg, Bentancur, Skip, they're all sort of progressive, but Basuma, what I like about him is that he'll play a pass forward and then, like a lot of, maybe sort of number 10s would, he follows the pass and makes a run beyond that pass that he played forward. Whereas maybe Højbjerg and Bentancur are a bit more reserved, a bit more conservative because of the role that they play. Don't get me wrong. But also because they're not that sort of player that, will always do that. Apologies, everybody. Let me turn off notifications there for a second. But lastly, as well, or sorry, not lastly, but he is a midfield general. I've seen this guy dominate games. It's probably why Conte wanted to bring him in the first place, is because this guy just absolutely dominates games. On top of that, he has an incredible shot from distance. I mean, we have seen him hit some bangers in the Premier League. Doesn't score too often, but does have a good banger on him. Bissouma for sure. Very aggressive, especially with the way he defends. Is just a bit of a pest at times. Just was really good at just poking the ball away from players, and is really aggressive the way that he goes into challenges as well. And he is a strong and really good tackler as well, everybody. But there you are, Yves Bissouma, everybody. Let me know what you think of this signing. I think we're all happy about it, because another huge point is just the fact that while maybe this channel, a lot of people who do watch this channel, a lot of us do know a lot of European footballers that we probably should be looking at. But I think when it comes to people who just watch the Premier League, like Yves Bissouma is easily one of the best midfielders in the sort of position that we're getting him for in the Premier League, and he's easily on everybody's list. And I'm probably not gonna be stretching this too much by saying that all the top clubs, I think, in the Premier League have definitely taken a look at this guy and have definitely wanted this guy at their club at one stage or another. So this is a top signing. I'm pretty sure every Spurs fan's going to be happy with this one, especially people who maybe don't always have suggestions for who Spurs should go after. Anybody who's a football fan, anybody who's been watching the Premier League knows about Bissouma. So I'm pretty sure we're all really happy about this one. But let me know in the comments down below, everybody, what you thought of this kind of breakdown, and let me think what you think of his stats, like what he can bring to this team, who he maybe, kind of knocks out of the first team. Is Højbjerg going to have to sit more games out? Is Bentancur going to be sitting more games out? Are we going to see the 3-5-2 a bit more? All those sort of things that you guys do such a great job on. Feel free to put those in the comments. Drop a super thanks. If you do want to support the channel, hit that like button as always on your way out. Hit that subscribe if you're new, and I will be seeing you.